After uncovering hidden recordings, diaries, and undeniable proof that shattered years of lies, investigators finally exposed Brandon's deception, cleared my father after 8 years in prison, and forced us to rebuild our broken family piece by piece while facing the haunting reality of betrayal, survival, and justice. My mother believed she could substitute my real dad with her disturbing new partner and force me to address him as father, yet she had no idea I was still communicating with my biological dad. I had just turned 13 when my mom became engaged to Brandon. My father had received a manslaughter conviction about 5 months earlier. He had killed a person at the tavern, though he hadn't touched any alcohol. I was present with him. He went to the restroom, then emerged moments afterward appearing frightened and smeared with blood. He yelled for someone to contact the authorities, and they came rapidly. However, without much explanation, they placed him under arrest and drove him away. The following time I encountered him was in jail. It didn't add up, however. Father never possessed any aggressive tendencies. He insisted he was innocent. And how mother behaved following his sentencing made me increasingly doubtful. She introduced Brandon immediately. From the first day, she declared he was my replacement father since the previous one was obviously a beast, and informed me that my father was a murderer who I should avoid for my personal security. I wasn't certain what to think initially, yet when 5 months afterward, my mother revealed to me that they were getting married and I had to begin addressing Brandon as dad, I grew fairly certain of father's innocence. During this period is also when everything began. Brandon became relaxed. He started gazing at me during meals, speaking phrases such as, "You're maturing rapidly, turning into quite an attractive young lady." The most terrible aspect was my mother believed it was charming. Including when I informed my mother initially that Brandon caused my skin to feel uncomfortable, she claimed I was being theatrical. She probably informed him about my comments because that evening as she rested, Brandon entered my bedroom and he seized my arm tightly enough to create bruises and stated, "You understand what occurs to mischievous children who tattle." I felt petrified, yet I recognized I couldn't rely on my mother by speaking to her. Therefore, I maintained the secret. I additionally began maintaining another secret during this period. I began composing messages to father. I would conceal them inside my schoolbook sheets and send them from my companion's residence following classes. Father would respond via the jail's electronic mail to an address I established, without mother's awareness. Circumstances became particularly terrible one certain Thursday, however. I returned from classes one afternoon to discover mother had altered my surname on every educational document to Brandon's without notifying me. "You'll appreciate this when you're grown," she stated. That evening, Brandon entered my bedroom to honor becoming an actual household currently and positioned himself on my mattress. He placed his palm on my leg and stated I ought to feel thankful to possess a father who's concerned. I shoved him away and secured myself in the washroom until he departed. I recall corresponding with father regarding that event. The message I received from him was on actual stationery this occasion, and sections of it were moist and transparent, nearly like he had wept during composition. That nearly destroyed me. However, fortunately, there existed one matter I anticipated, the opportunity to visit him. His birthday was approaching, and I recall eagerly requesting mother if I might see him. I explained that I understood she disliked him, yet it was his special day. Only this once, and for several minutes. I begged, I stated. Yet naturally, I received a rejection. In fact, I received something more terrible. Mother stated we were unable to attend since that exact weekend. Brandon conveniently possessed auto exhibition passes and required us all to attend as a group. He particularly demanded we have connected accommodation rooms. When I expressed I would prefer seeing father, mother erupted. "He's a murderer. You're not seeing a killer." When I stated he's not guilty and he remains my father, Brandon struck me across my cheek while mother observed. She remained silent. I was compelled to accompany them that weekend. And during my sleep, the most terrible occurred. Brandon entered. He was intoxicated, and this occasion, he didn't limit himself to merely a leg touch. His palm traveled completely. I had never experienced such filth and shame. I recall returning home shattered. And to worsen everything further, the week we returned, my mother discovered the concealed messages from father I had been storing. She incinerated them in the garden. And as discipline for contacting him, she removed my bedroom entrance from its frame for observation. Naturally, Brandon viewed this as a chance. He would position himself in the entrance during nighttime observing me rest. I recall that being an actual turning point for me. I recall secretly going to the educational facility's library after schedule the following day to message father. I probably transmitted an hour-long message that was incoherent since I simply spoke about all things. I wasn't sure what I anticipated, whether I actually desired something since I felt so empty. However, then 14 days afterward, I received a response from him. It was extensive, extremely extensive, expressing all the correct statements and how all would be fine. Yet there existed one statement that was notable. "Did you examine where I mentioned?" I grew puzzled. Examine where? I began reviewing each individual message he had ever transmitted to me. And that's when I located it. In one of the newer messages, Father had instructed me to ascend to the loft and look behind the heater. I recall viewing that message the day following requesting my mother if I might visit him. I believe I was too devastated to review completely and somehow overlooked it. Regardless, I created a significant mental reminder of what Father stated and waited until Mother and Brandon went for their evening out. That occurred the following week. My palms trembled ascending into the loft with a light, and behind the heater, I discovered a plastic-covered diary. I accessed it to the indicated section Father instructed me to. It was marked weeks prior to Father's detention, and in Father's script, it stated, "It's been several weeks since I discovered Lauren and Brandon secretly meeting at the tavern. I'm unsure how to address her." I felt stunned, surprised, and that's when I detected the noise of an automobile arriving at the residence that caused my blood to freeze. They had returned prematurely. The eatery might have been overly packed, or perhaps they'd had an argument. I could detect automobile doors closing and Mother's shoes tapping on the path. My pulse raced as I held the diary against my torso, understanding I possessed merely moments to determine my actions. I detected Brandon's forceful steps on the stairway, each squeak of the aged timber, transmitting a shock through my body. My palms were trembling so severely I nearly released the light, its ray moving erratically over the dusty loft floor. I pushed the diary beneath my clothing, the leather surface chilly on my body, and rushed toward the loft entrance, yet I was too sluggish. Brandon's face emerged through the opening precisely as I approached the steps, his shadowy gaze instantly focusing on me. He watched me for an extended period, his face unreadable in the faint illumination. Then he ascended the remainder of the path, his wide frame barely squeezing through the entrance. I retreated toward the barrier, sensing the coarse timber pressing into my back, the diary pushing on my abdomen beneath my clothing. He examined the loft gradually, purposefully observing the unsettled particles that floated in the atmosphere like miniature spirits, the displaced containers near the heater, where I discovered Father's concealed items. He questioned what I was accomplishing up here, his tone peaceful, yet with a sharpness that caused my flesh to prickle. I explained I was searching for my childhood plush toys from when I was younger, attempting to maintain my voice firm. He didn't trust me. I could observe it in how his mouth clenched, how his fists tensed at his waist. He moved nearer, and I could detect the alcohol on his exhalation from supper, combined with his fragrance that Mother claimed was costly, yet always caused me to feel nauseated. He stated I was an awful deceiver, exactly like my dad. This statement struck me like a hit. Then he seized my shoulder, his hand pressing in firmly enough to mark, and pulled me toward the steps. I needed to utilize my opposite palm to prevent the diary from dropping from my clothing, holding it firmly to my form. Mother was positioned at the base of the steps, her limbs folded and toes striking restlessly. She appeared irritated, questioning why I was secretly moving around like some type of criminal in my personal residence. Brandon informed her I was likely concealing something, his palm still holding my shoulder controlling. He proposed they investigate my bedroom, and I observed a glimmer of something sinister in his gaze. I became frantic and stated I simply desired to locate my childhood bear since I was unable to rest without my entrance. The statements emerged too quickly, too urgently. Mother shifted her gaze, yet appeared to accept it, likely since she was exhausted and didn't desire to handle additional conflict. That evening, I remained awake until I detected them both sleeping. Brandon's low snore combining with Mother's gentler respiration. The residence settled into its evening squeaks and moans as I cautiously concealed the diary within my pillow cover, sensing the edges pressing into my face when I reclined. I couldn't chance viewing more with Brandon monitoring me each hour, his form emerging in my entrance like a timer. The following day was Saturday. Mother prepared pancakes like nothing had occurred, singing poorly to some tune on the broadcast. The regularity of it caused my belly to churn. Brandon maintained watching me throughout the dining surface, his gaze tracking each motion as I moved nourishment around my dish. I pardoned myself to utilize the lavatory and brought the diary with me, concealing it in the cistern wrapped in a synthetic container I discovered beneath the basin. The liquid was frigid on my hands as I cautiously positioned it within. At education on Monday, I secretly entered the technology room during midday meal, informing my companions I needed to complete a task. The space was vacant besides the buzz of aged machines and the sound of the wall timepiece. I began capturing images of every sheet of the diary with my device, positioning it to prevent the reflection from the bright illumination. My palms were still trembling, causing some images to blur. The records went back numerous years. Father's recognizable script growing more desperate as periods passed. Father documented his doubts about observing Brandon's vehicle at strange times stationed along the road, about Mother behaving odd and removed. One record discussed discovering a bill for a lodge in Mother's bag when he was searching for candy. Another discussed Brandon appearing at the tavern during Father's work periods, constantly observing from a side seat, constantly hiding like a hunter examining its target. I transferred all items to an online storage I created with a false identity, my pulse racing as the completion indicator gradually progressed. Then I removed the images from my device, verifying 2 times to ensure they were actually erased. I understood Brandon might inspect it. He'd been examining my possessions more recently. When I arrived home that afternoon, he was positioned in my bedroom, resting on my mattress like he possessed the area. He'd examined all items. My compartments were discharged, garments dispersed over the ground like dropped foliage. My bedding was overturned, the container base revealed, including my aged accessory container was discharged. Inexpensive chains and companionship bands nodded collectively. He questioned where it was, his tone threateningly soft. I acted confused, questioning what he was discussing, attempting to appear puzzled rather than scared. He seized my arms and jolted me forcefully, my molars clicking jointly. He stated he understood I located something in the loft, that he wasn't foolish. Mother arrived home then, her keys rattling as she announced greeting. She questioned what was occurring, examining the damage of my bedroom with elevated brows. Brandon effortlessly deceived, his complete behavior shifting instantly. He stated he was assisting me reorganize my disorganized bedroom, that I'd requested for his assistance. He actually grinned, that artificial grin that never touched his gaze. She trusted him like constantly, likely since it was simpler than questioning. That evening at supper, Brandon declared they were advancing the marriage. Rather than following year, it would be following month. He stated he couldn't delay any further to create our household legitimate. Mother shrieked with joy, applauding her palms like an infant. I felt ill, the poultry on my dish abruptly appearing dull and unappetizing. During the following weeks, Brandon observed me continuously. He placed a recorder in the corridor, directed at where my entrance previously existed, the crimson indicator flashing at me like a malevolent gaze. He began transporting me to and from education. No additional transport with my companions. He'd remain in the lot, motor operating, observing all who communicated with me. He confiscated my device at evening, setting it on his bedside table where I couldn't access it. Yet I continued laboring during daytime. I produced sheets from the diary at education and concealed them in my storage, securing them behind aged books. I required assistance yet didn't understand who to believe. My instructors appeared unaware. My companions wouldn't comprehend. Then I recalled Uncle Henry. He was Father's closest companion since secondary education, the type of person who appeared to assist without being requested. They'd been indivisible until Father's detention. Mother had prohibited him from reaching us following that, claiming he was a negative effect, that he allowed Father's aggressive behaviors. Yet I understood that was false. Uncle Henry was a decent person who had the scent of wood shavings and constantly possessed caramel sweets in his pouch. He labored in building and possessed 3 offspring of his personal, twin males, and a small female who addressed me as her large relative. I located his contact in an aged directory Mother had overlooked in the cooking area cabinet, hidden beneath old vouchers and depleted power cells. I contacted him from the public telephone outside education during physical education period, the metal frigid on my hearing. I informed the instructor I felt unwell and required oxygen, holding my abdomen for appearance. Uncle Henry responded on the 3rd tone, his rough sound becoming gentler when I stated who I was. I spoke rapidly, statements overlapping each other, informing him I required assistance, that Father was blameless, that I possessed evidence. He instructed me to decelerate, to inhale. Then he stated to encounter him at the community library following education the subsequent day. He'd inform my mother he observed me strolling and provided a lift if she questioned. His sound was firm, comforting, and for the initial occasion in periods, I sensed like perhaps matters would be acceptable. Brandon was doubtful when I stated I was remaining late for a team assignment. He interrogated me regarding who was in my team, what the assignment concerned, which instructor allocated it. Yet my past instructor supported me when he contacted to verify, likely irritated at being disturbed during her preparation time. I basically sprinted to the library, my pack hitting against my backbone. Uncle Henry was positioned in the lot in his aged collection vehicle, the crimson coating worn yet neat. He appeared more aged than I recalled, with additional silver in his facial hair and more profound marks around his gaze. I displayed him images of the diary records on my device, scrolling through them rapidly. His expression became more serious with every one, his hands pale as he held the control. He stated he constantly understood something was incorrect regarding Father's detention. The narrative never added up. Too numerous gaps, too suitable. He questioned if I still possessed the real diary. I informed him where I concealed it, and he agreed approvingly. He stated we required more than simply Father's doubts. We required actual proof, observers, something solid. He was acquainted with some individuals who labored at the tavern that evening. Perhaps they observed something. recalled something the authorities didn't trouble to inquire about. During the subsequent 2 weeks, I encountered Uncle Henry at the library 3 additional occasions. Every encounter seemed like a secret film, verifying over my back, taking various paths. He'd located Edward, who was operating protection that evening. Edward was a large person with gentle gaze who recalled all things. He recalled Brandon being present, which was unusual since Brandon had informed authorities he was home all night viewing television. Edward stated he observed Brandon enter the lavatory directly prior to Father. Perhaps 30 seconds. Yet Edward had been too frightened to speak following Father receiving detention so rapidly, scared of becoming engaged. Scared of Brandon, who possessed relationships throughout. Uncle Henry additionally located Caroline, who was serving drinks that evening. She possessed wavy scarlet locks and a precise recall for appearances. She stated Brandon had been appearing for periods prior to the event, constantly inquiring regarding Father's timetable, acting sociable. She believed it was odd, yet didn't consider much of it at the moment. Individuals inquired regarding customers constantly. She recalled Brandon purchasing a beverage that evening, a whiskey plain, then vanishing for some time prior to the corpse being discovered. She'd been the individual to contact emergency services, her palms trembling so severely she could scarcely press numbers. The advancement arrived when Uncle Henry spoke to Brian, who supervised the tavern. Brian was a senior person who'd operated the establishment for 2 decades. Brian noted they'd improved their safety equipment a month prior to the event. The authorities had solely obtained the primary recording equipment, yet there existed a reserve system that documented the corridor to the lavatories. Brian still possessed those documents on an aged storage device in his workplace. He'd overlooked them until Henry inquired. The device collecting particles behind aged alcohol receipts. We gathered at Brian's residence to view the recordings. His sitting area had the scent of tobacco and espresso. My abdomen was twisted as Brian attached the device to his portable computer. The time indicator displayed Brandon accessing the lavatory at 9:47 evening, strolling leisurely like he possessed all the moments in existence. Father accessed at 9:52 evening, likely simply requiring to utilize the lavatory following his work period. Brandon exited at 9:51 evening, inspecting his timepiece and flattening his clothing. Father exited at 9:53 evening, smeared in blood, yelling for assistance, his expression a cover of surprise and terror. It was evident as daylight. Brandon possessed 4 minutes isolated in that lavatory. More than sufficient moments to execute someone and arrange a setup. Uncle Henry duplicated the recordings onto several memory devices. His palms firm and systematic. He stated we required to be cautious regarding how we managed this. We couldn't simply approach the authorities. Brandon might possess relationships there, associates who were indebted to him. We required to construct an unbreakable situation initially. He instructed me to behave ordinarily at residence, not to reveal that we were aware of anything. It was the most difficult matter I'd ever needed to perform. Yet Brandon must have detected something. Perhaps I was a poor performer. Perhaps he was simply suspicious. He began becoming more hostile. One evening, he entered my bedroom and positioned himself on my mattress, the bedding sinking beneath his mass. The corridor recorder couldn't observe him from that position. He stated he was aware I'd been secretly meeting with Uncle Henry. Someone had observed us at the library, likely one of his friends who appeared to be throughout. He stated if I didn't cease whatever I was performing, Mother might become injured. He stated mishaps occur constantly, his tone informal like he was talking about the climate. Individuals tumble down staircases. Vehicles have brake issues. Fuel escapes occur. I comprehended the warning. Sensed it rest in my torso, like a frozen rock. I was scared yet attempted to remain peaceful, maintaining my respiration regular. I informed Uncle Henry at our subsequent gathering, murmuring although we were isolated. He stated we required to proceed more quickly. He'd been communicating with Father's attorney, displaying him what we'd discovered. The attorney was thrilled yet careful. He stated we required the genuine diary also. It would reinforce the situation, demonstrate the images weren't altered. I informed him I'd obtain it, although the idea caused me to desire to be sick. That evening, I remained awake until 3 o'clock morning, observing the timepiece's crimson digits alter with painful gradualness. I moved to the lavatory, my uncovered toes quiet on the rug. I cautiously obtained the diary from the cistern, the synthetic still shielding it. It remained moisture-free in its synthetic covering. Father's statements protected. I placed it in my pack for education, fastening it into the internal compartment. Yet when I exited the lavatory, Brandon was positioned in the corridor like a phantom. He questioned what I was performing awake, his gaze shining in the shadow. I stated I sensed unwell, grasping my abdomen. He watched me for an extended period, then permitted me to proceed. I sensed his gaze on my spine entirely to my bedroom. The subsequent day, my pack was absent. I located it in the cooking area, vacant. Its materials distributed over the surface. Brandon was positioned at the surface with a diary before him, turning through sheets with dramatic curiosity. Mother was viewing it, her expression light and puzzled. Brandon had informed her I'd been composing imagination tales regarding him, that I was troubled, that I required assistance. He'd begun indicating particular records, stating, "Observe how she's attempting to imitate your spouse's script. Notice how she notes you and me jointly? This is obviously her unwell imagination regarding separating us." Mother's puzzlement became rage as Brandon continued speaking, interlacing his deceptions with sufficient reality to create them credible. Mother trusted him.
She stated she was displeased in me.
That creating deceptions regarding Brandon was unwell, that she believed I was handling Father's departure superior to this. I attempted to inform her it was Father's diary, yet she wouldn't hear. She stated I was clearly imitating Father's script to incriminate Brandon since I couldn't acknowledge him as my replacement parent. She stated I required treatment, perhaps including a particular residential education for difficult adolescents. Brandon proposed his relative operated one in a different region. Extremely rigid, extremely remote. Excellent for repairing issue youngsters who spoke untruths and created difficulty. The manner he stated it caused my blood to freeze. I sensed the barriers narrowing, the space rotating somewhat. That afternoon at education, I located Uncle Henry's vehicle in the lot at midday meal. I entered and collapsed weeping as I informed him what occurred. He stated not to stress, we still possess the recordings. Yet when I arrived home that evening, my device was absent from my pack. Brandon possessed it. He examined all items and located my online storage, determining the code following 3 attempts. He forced me to observe as he removed all the diary images, his hand pressing at the display with cruel pleasure. He stated Uncle Henry's duplicates wouldn't be significant without the genuine to confirm them toward. He stated the images might be falsified, that any reasonable attorney would claim they were altered without the genuine diary to examine the script. The tavern recordings were distinct. That was from a legitimate safety equipment with time indicators that might be confirmed. Yet script and images, too simple to falsify. That evening, Mother informed me I was departing for residential education on Monday. This unique location would assist me handle my fantasies regarding Brandon. She'd previously contacted the education. They were anticipating me. It was 1,000 miles distant in the peaks. No devices permitted. No external communication for the initial 6 months to prevent harmful effects. I understood this was Brandon's scheme to silence me permanently, to cause me to vanish without really harming me. I succeeded to escape Saturday dawn when Mother went shopping and Brandon was showering. I could detect the liquid operating as I carefully opened the front entrance. I sprinted to Ashley's residence and utilized her device to contact Uncle Henry. Ashley's mother was at employment, and Ashley protected for me. Praise her. I informed him regarding the residential education. He stated to gather a suitcase and encounter him at the library in 60 minutes. Yet when I returned home, Brandon was positioned on the front stairs, his locks still moist. He'd observed I was absent. He pulled me within by my locks, my head stinging. Mother wasn't returned still. He pushed me toward the barrier forcefully enough to drop an image border and stated I'd destroyed all items. He stated he'd labored too diligently to allow a spoiled child ruin his schemes. He stated Father earned to decay in jail, that he'd been organizing this for periods prior to that evening at the tavern. He stated Mother was simple to influence, so urgent for notice following Father began laboring double positions to settle the loan. I questioned him why he executed that person in the lavatory, requiring to listen to him state it. Brandon chuckled, a hideous noise. He stated the person was simply in the incorrect location at the incorrect moment. Brandon had entered there to position a bloodied blade he'd arranged, one that would possess Father's fingerprints on it from the cooking area at residence, yet the intoxicated person observed him setting it beside the basin and began questioning matters, becoming too near. Therefore, Brandon needed to quiet him rapidly and disorderly utilizing that identical blade. Then, when Father entered moments afterward to assist, it was ideal. The blood was recent. Father's fingerprints covered all items when he attempted to assist the sufferer, attempted to halt the flow. And in the disorder, Brandon took the real killing tool and abandoned a separate blade at the location, one he'd additionally arranged, yet that wouldn't connect to him. I was documenting all items on Ashley's device that I'd concealed in my pouch. The document key activated prior to I including strolled in. Brandon didn't observe. He was too occupied boasting regarding how intelligent he'd been, how he'd used protection, how he'd examined the tavern's timetable for periods. He stated following Father was absent, wedding Mother was simply intelligent commerce. She possessed excellent health coverage from her position at the medical center, and I'd be valued including additional and government assistance if something occurred to her. Perhaps a vehicle mishap, perhaps a tumble, perhaps she'd simply become unhappy and consume excessive medication. That's when Mother entered. She'd returned prematurely, since she overlooked her money holder. She listened to all items Brandon had simply stated. Her expression became pale as sheets. She released the food, citrus fruits tumbling over the ground. Brandon rotated around, understanding his error. He attempted to reverse, stating I'd caused him upset, that he didn't intend it, that he was simply attempting to frighten me directly, yet Mother had listened sufficiently. The cover had ultimately risen. Brandon moved near her and she retreated distant, her palm extending behind her. She instructed him to depart. He stated she was responding excessively. She seized a cooking area blade from the holder and instructed him to exit or she'd contact the authorities. Brandon chuckled and stated she wouldn't risk it. Excessive embarrassment, excessive disgrace. What would the community believe? Yet Mother's palm was firm as she grasped the blade. For the initial occasion in periods, I observed the mother I previously recognized, the individual who shielded me from bad dreams and treated injured joints. Brandon understood she was genuine. His expression shifted, the disguise ultimately falling entirely. He seized his keys and money holder from the surface, yet prior to departing, he faced Mother and stated this wasn't finished. He stated he was aware of excessive regarding her, regarding the relationships she'd possessed prior to Father when they were initially wed, regarding the funds she'd taken from Father's funds to handle her purchasing obligations. He stated if she approached the authorities, he'd ruin her standing. Then he departed, closing the entrance, so forcefully the panes trembled and the lingering images dropped from the barriers. Mother fell on the ground, weeping, her form trembling with cries. I positioned beside her and displayed her the documentation on Ashley's device. She heard Brandon's admission once more, her expression disintegrating additional with every statement. She maintained stating she was apologetic, that she'd been so foolish, that she'd disappointed me and Father equally. I informed her we required to contact the authorities immediately, yet she was frightened of Brandon's warnings, frightened of forfeiting all items. I contacted Uncle Henry and stated he arrived within moments with the tavern recordings on a memory device. We positioned Mother at the cooking area surface and displayed her all items. The diary records I'd preserved, captures of the safety recordings displaying Brandon's actions, the observer declarations he'd gathered and had certified. Mother became ill when she understood she'd been resting beside Father's murderer for periods, that she'd been organizing a marriage with him. She ultimately consented to contact the authorities. 2 investigators arrived to obtain our declarations. They were expert yet gentle, providing Mother handkerchiefs and communicating softly to me. They heard the documentation of Brandon's admissions several occasions. They viewed the tavern recordings on our portable computer. They obtained the diary as proof, managing it cautiously with protected palms. One investigator stated they'd been possessing uncertainties regarding Father's situation regardless. The investigation had never completely matched, yet the demand to resolve the situation had been strong. Brandon's admission completed all the openings. They issued a detention order for Brandon that evening, yet he vanished. His residence was vacant, emptied rapidly. His vehicle was absent. The authorities stated not to be concerned. They'd locate him. They positioned a patrol vehicle beyond our residence, simply in situation. Mother and I didn't rest that evening. We moved the sofa toward the front entrance and positioned in the sitting area with all the illumination activated, startling at each noise. The subsequent dawn, Uncle Henry contacted. He'd listened from his building friends that Brandon had been noticed at a lodge 2 communities distant attempting to settle money for accommodation. The authorities were en route. By midday, they possessed him in detention. He attempted to escape, yet didn't travel distant. They discovered proof in his vehicle connecting him to the genuine killing tool. He'd maintained the real blade all these periods like some unwell prize concealed in a secured container in his rear compartment. The blade from the felony location had been a fake, yet the actual one still possessed remnants of the sufferer's blood in the grip gaps. Brandon attempted to refuse all items initially. He stated, I'd falsified the documentation utilizing artificial intelligence, that Mother was deceiving to shield me since she sensed responsible regarding Father. Yet the proof was tremendous. The tavern recordings displayed him accessing that lavatory. His finger marks were on the actual killing tool, once they examined it correctly. The investigation that hadn't corresponded Father abruptly created ideal logic when used to Brandon. Including the position of the injuries corresponded Brandon's stature, not Father's. Confronted with all items, Brandon ultimately collapsed. He admitted completely in return for a settlement. He confessed to organizing the entire matter, to incriminating Father, to influencing Mother. He including confessed to matters we weren't aware regarding. Additional felonies in additional regions, additional sufferers who'd been accused for matters they didn't perform. The investigator stated Brandon was a continuous hunter who'd been escaping with it for periods, relocating from location to location, constantly locating exposed females with offspring. Father's attorney submitted for an urgent request based on the fresh proof. The magistrate examined all items and commanded Father's instant liberation. Following 8 periods in jail for a felony he didn't execute, father was returning residence. Mother and I traveled to collect him. The journey was quiet besides the broadcast operating gently. Mother maintained weeping, wiping at her gaze with handkerchiefs. I wasn't aware what to express, my windpipe constricted with feeling. When the jail entrances unlocked and father strolled through, he appeared tinier than I recalled, slimmer, more aged, his locks additional silver than chocolate currently, yet his gaze illuminated when he observed me. I sprinted to him and embraced him more firmly than I'd ever embraced someone. He had a different scent, like commercial cleaner and melancholy, yet he was still my father. He grasped me and wept into my locks, murmuring that he'd longed for me so greatly that he'd never ceased trusting I'd understand the reality. Mother remained distant, uncertain, twisting her palms. Father gazed at her for an extended period. Then he stated they'd communicate afterward, that currently he simply desired to return residence. The journey returning was silent besides father questioning minor inquiries. How was education? Had I developed higher? Was my preferred eatery still functioning? Regular father inquiries that seemed everything except regular following all items we'd experienced. We arrived residence and father simply remained in the entrance for a moment, gazing around like he was recording all items. The residence appeared distinct, without Brandon's belongings throughout. Mother had discarded everything he'd handled, creating unusual vacant areas on racks and barriers. Father strolled through every space gradually, moving his hands over furnishings, collecting image borders that Mother hadn't managed to substitute still. That initial evening was uncomfortable as anything. Father rested on the sofa, although Mother provided him their previous sleeping room. I detected him shifting around at 3 o'clock dawn. Likely couldn't rest following periods in a chamber. I located him in the cooking area preparing espresso with trembling palms. We positioned at the surface in quietness until he ultimately questioned if I was fine, actually fine. I informed him regarding Brandon, regarding all items. He heard without stopping, his mouth becoming more rigid with every element. When I completed, he stated he was apologetic he couldn't shield me. I informed him it wasn't his responsibility. The subsequent several days were a confusion of attorneys and documentation. Father's attorney was laboring on receiving his history entirely removed, not simply reversed. There was discussion of payment for incorrect confinement, yet father stated he didn't worry regarding funds. He simply desired his existence returned. Mother maintained attempting to communicate with him, pursuing him throughout the residence, yet he wasn't prepared. He'd respond to her inquiries with single statements and locate reasons to exit the space. Brandon's court appointment was scheduled for 6 periods distant. The lawyer stated with his admission and all our proof, he'd likely receive existence without release. They'd connected him to 3 additional killings in separate regions, all with comparable trends. He'd incriminate someone near to the sufferer, then arrive to console the mourning household. The investigator stated we were fortunate that his additional sufferers hadn't lived to reveal him. I returned to education, yet all items seemed distinct. Children murmured when I strolled past. All individuals were aware regarding Brandon and father currently. Ashley remained with me, however, and several additional companions who really counted. My instructors were additionally gentle, which nearly created it more terrible. I didn't desire sympathy. I simply desired regular. Yet regular was absent, likely permanently. Father began laboring building with Uncle Henry. Physical work, he stated, assisted empty his thoughts. He'd return residents fatigued and smeared in particles, yet he appeared more peaceful. He was visiting a counselor also. Some person who focused in incorrect sentence distress. Father didn't discuss the meetings, yet I could observe they were assisting. He ceased jumping when entrances closed. Ceased inspecting fasteners compulsively. Mother relocated following 14 days. She leased a tiny residence throughout community, stated she required room to determine matters. I was comforted, truthfully. The stress when her and father were in the identical space was overwhelming. She deceived him in the most terrible manner achievable, including if Brandon had influenced her. Some matters you can't return from. She questioned if I desired to remain with her occasionally, yet I stated negative. I required to be with father. The separation documents arrived a period afterward. Father endorsed them without viewing them. Simply desired it finished. Mother provided him all items. The residence, the vehicle, complete guardianship of me. Her remorse was consuming her living. She began visiting a counselor, also, attempting to comprehend how she'd been so unaware. I sensed terrible for her occasionally, yet then I'd recall how she selected Brandon above father, how she didn't trust me, and the compassion would disappear. Uncle Henry turned into a constant at our residence. He'd deliver his offspring during weekends, and we'd have barbecues like the previous times. His identical males, Elijah and John, were solely 8, yet they worshipped father. They didn't worry regarding his history, simply that he could launch a ball and share amusing tales. His girl Deborah was my years, and we became near quickly. She comprehended what it was similar to possess your household flipped inverted. Her mother had departed when she was 10. 3 periods following father was released. I needed to provide evidence at a preliminary trial. The lawyer stated my evidence would guarantee Brandon couldn't assert madness or pressure. I dressed in my finest outfit, the azure one father purchased me for my special day. 2 periods passed. My palms trembled as I promised to speak the reality. Brandon positioned at the protection surface in an citrus uniform, appearing tinier than I recalled. He attempted to make eye contact, yet I watched directly forward. I informed them all items regarding the warnings, the contact, the evening at the lodge. The magistrate needed to announce a break when I discussed regarding locating father's diary, since I began weeping too severely to proceed. Father wasn't permitted in the chamber, since he might be summoned as an observer afterward, yet Uncle Henry was present. He provided me a positive signal from the seating, alerting me I was courageous, that I could perform this. Brandon's attorney attempted to create me appear like a puzzled child, questioning if perhaps I'd misinterpreted Brandon's purposes. I remained peaceful and restated what occurred precisely as it occurred. The lawyer displayed the documentation from Ashley's device, and Brandon's expression became ashen. His attorney requested for settlement that midday. 25 to existence rather than existence, without release. The lawyer stated, absolutely not. Following the trial, journalists attempted to communicate with us beyond the judicial building. Father protected me with his form as we moved through them to Uncle Henry's vehicle. They yelled inquiries regarding pardon, regarding progressing onward, regarding how it seemed to observe Brandon in restraints.
We didn't respond.
There was nothing to express that would create them comprehend. This wasn't amusement. It was our existence. Mother began transmitting me messages, extended wandering regrets regarding how she disappointed as a parent, how she ought to have observed the indicators. I viewed the initials several, then began discarding them unread. Father stated I ought to think about pardoning her ultimately for my personal tranquility, not hers, yet I wasn't prepared. Perhaps I'd never be prepared. She'd selected a beast above her personal household. Some matters are unpardonable. Brandon's real court was harsh. They introduced his additional sufferers' relatives, displaying trend following trend of his conduct. One female from Arizona provided evidence regarding how he courted her following her spouse passed in a doubtful mishap. She'd received negative feelings and abandoned him, likely preserved her personal existence. A different household from Nevada discussed their offspring who was completing period for a killing that appeared precisely like father's situation. The lawyer stated they were reviewing that situation, also. Father provided evidence on session 3. He dressed in his sole formal outfit, the one from their marriage that he maintained for some cause. He discussed regarding locating the corpse, regarding attempting to assist, regarding the puzzlement when they detained him. He discussed regarding jail, regarding absent my special day, regarding composing messages I never received to view. His sound cracked when he discussed regarding the afternoon I was delivered, how he vowed to constantly shield me and seemed like he'd disappointed. Brandon assumed the position on session 5 toward his attorney's counsel. He attempted to portray himself as a sufferer of situation, stated the person in the lavatory had assaulted him initially. Yet beneath examination, his narrative dropped separate. He opposed himself, became upset, displayed his genuine expression to the panel. When the lawyer questioned regarding his schemes for me and mother, he declined to respond. His personal attorney appeared beaten. The panel considered for 2 periods. Responsible on all accusations. Killing, plot, deception, tried attack on a youth. The catalog continued. The magistrate condemned him to existence without release. Sequential punishments for every felony. Brandon didn't respond, simply watched at the surface. As they directed him away, he gazed at me one final occasion. I watched returning, desiring him to observe that he hadn't shattered me, that I'd succeeded. Father and I visited his preferred eatery following the small Hispanic location that still possessed his image on the barrier from when he was a constant. The proprietor embraced him and stated the food was complimentary. We consumed in relaxed quietness, both fatigued yet comforted. It was finished. Actually finished. Brandon would perish in jail, and we could begin reconstructing. Mother attempted to arrive at the residence the subsequent period. Father wouldn't permit her within, communicate with her via the mesh entrance. She desired to regret, once more, desired to attempt household therapy. Father stated negative. That vessel had departed. She required to progress, and so did we. She wept and pleaded, yet father remained steady. I observed from the stairway, sensing zero. She'd created her selection, and currently she needed to exist with it. I began visiting a counselor also. Some woman titled Physician Cheryl, who focused in distress. She assisted me handle all items. Instructed me it wasn't my responsibility, that I'd been remarkably courageous. Some periods I trusted her, some periods I didn't. Yet gradually the bad dreams ceased. I ceased inspecting fasteners compulsively, ceased jumping when mail strolled after me. Advancement arrived in tiny stages. Father and I created fresh patterns. Sunday morning meal at the restaurant, Wednesday film evenings, assisting Uncle Henry with assignments on Saturdays. We communicated additional than we ever possessed prior regarding all items. Education, companions, the tomorrow. He assisted me with assignments although mathematics wasn't his powerful area. He arrived to each education function, applauding too noisily at my average woodwind shows. We were discovering how to be a household, once more, simply the pair of us. 6 periods following the court, Father encountered someone. Caroline, the server who provided evidence, began appearing. Initially simply as a companion, then something additional. She caused Father to chuckle. Actual chuckles, not the compelled ones he'd been performing. I enjoyed her. She didn't attempt to be my mother, simply handled me like an individual. She'd deliver restaurant food and we'd observe terrible films, creating enjoyment of the story gaps. Father grinned additional when she was present. Mother ultimately ceased attempting to reach us. I listened from Ashley's mother that she'd relocated to a different region, beginning new where no one recognized her tale. Portion of me wished she'd locate tranquility. Portion of me didn't worry. She'd been so simply deceived, so rapid to substitute father. Perhaps Brandon had observed that flaw in her from the beginning. Perhaps that's why he'd selected our household to ruin. A period following all items, Father received a payment from the region for incorrect confinement. Not fortunes, yet sufficient to settle the residence and place funds aside for my university. He purchased a fresh vehicle, assumed a holiday to the peaks, ultimately began existing once more. He maintained laboring building, however. Stated he enjoyed the truthfulness of it. You either constructed something correctly or you didn't. No space for deceptions or influence. I became 15 that season. Father organized me a large celebration, likely compensating for the special days he'd absent. Uncle Henry's household arrived. Caroline was present, including some children from education appeared. We possessed a jumping residence, which was absurd for adolescents, yet no one objected. Father prepared hamburgers and shared humiliating tales regarding when I was small. For several periods, we seemed like a regular household possessing a regular celebration. That evening, following all individuals departed, Father and I tidied the garden in relaxed quietness. He appreciated me for trusting in him, for never abandoning. I informed him I constantly recognized he was blameless, that he wasn't able of injuring someone. He embraced me firmly and stated I'd preserved his existence. We both wept a small, yet it was the positive type of weeping, the recovery type. Existence continued. I created distinction list, began courting a pleasant person titled Rory for my science period. Father warned to sanitize his rifle when Rory arrived around, yet he was joking primarily. Caroline relocated in following a period, delivering her feline, Mr. Whiskers, who instantly took Father's seat. We turned into an unusual small household, constructed on distributed distress, yet maintained jointly by selection and affection. Brandon passed in jail 2 periods afterward. Cardiac failure, the message stated. He was 43. I sensed 0. When I viewed it, simply shut the message and returned to my assignments. Father questioned if I was fine and I stated, affirmative, I actually was. Brandon had been deceased to me since the afternoon they condemned him. His real passing was simply documentation, 0 additional. Mother transmitted a greeting for my 18th special day. Simply endorsed it. Affection, Mother. With no sending location. I maintained it for some cause, placed in my table compartment with additional matters I couldn't completely discard. Father stated perhaps eventually I'd desire to locate her. Create tranquility. Perhaps he was correct. Or perhaps some connections were intended to remain destroyed. Period would reveal. I received acceptance to university on a complete grant. Organizing to examine legal fairness. Perhaps turn into an attorney, assist additional relatives separated by deceptions. Father wept at completion, humiliating me before all individuals. Caroline captured 1,000 images, while Uncle Henry's household applauded from the seats. My selected household, the one that remained with me when all items dropped separate. The evening prior to I departed for university, Father and I positioned on the deck seat, observing lightning bugs. He informed me he was pleased with me, that I turned into an incredible youthful female, regardless of all items. I informed him I cared for him, that he was the greatest father someone could request. We positioned in relaxed quietness. No requirement for additional statements. We'd lived the most terrible matter possible and emerged more powerful. That was sufficient. Gazing backward currently, I occasionally ponder what would have occurred if I hadn't located Father's diary that evening. If Brandon had achieved in transmitting me distant. If Mother had wed him. If father had passed in jail, trusting no one worried. Yet I did locate it. I did resist. And occasionally, that's all you can perform. Resist for the reality and wish someone hears. In our situation, they ultimately did.